Welcome back to Sunday edition. Let's continue with this sugar issue and talk about the investigative process of it. And the Interior CS, Fred Matiang'i, has been blaming the porous borders for allowing the entry of contraband goods into the country. Patrick Amimo has the details.
Interior Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i appeared before the National Assembly's Joint Committee that is investigating the sugar import scandal and gave an update on the ongoing crackdown on contraband sugar and other goods.
The police, backing the regulatory agencies, have seized 1.4 million bags of sugar, 1,484 bags of rice, 87,000 bags of fertilizer, 90 cartons of assorted liquor. We have made 72 arrests so far since the exercise began. We're dealing with a very complex international criminal investigation that straddles the borders of our country.
Matiang'i was caged when asked to substantiate his claims that seized contraband sugar was tested and found to contain mercury.
They said, let us give a caution to the country and caution the country that some of the foods that we are consuming could be having these harmful chemicals and harmful substances. And the list is actually long. It is not just, mercury and lead and copper.
The Cabinet Secretary disclosed that the ministry used other laboratories besides the Kenya Bureau of Standards to test contrabands. Matiang'i said most of the sugar and other contrabands are sneaked into the country from Kismayo Port in Somalia through the porous border. He later held a one-hour closed-door meeting with lawmakers where he shared with them some sensitive dossier on contrabands.
I solemnly affirm that the information that I shall give to the joint.
The chairman of Rai Group and West Kenya Sugar Company Limited, Jaswan Rai, also appeared before the MPs and told them that he used tippers to transport bulk sugar from ship to warehouses, despite a notice from the port public health officer that no consignments should leave the port without rebagging to avoid contamination.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the other quantities were transported using tippers.
And in a new twist, Rai accused 4 importers, Stanwave Limited, Greenergy K Limited, the Commodity House Limited, Hydari P Limited, and Sony Sugar of allegedly repackaging and processed bulk brown sugar.
Was again in bulk, imported by South Nyanza Sugar, commonly known as Sony Sugar. Yeah. Even all these entire 3 ships, they were bagged in Mombasa, and the sugar sold in Mombasa in that condition. I for sure know that, to the best of my knowledge, forget about 1 bag, not 1 kilo went to any factory for processing.
The probe continues. Patrick Amimo, KTN News.
Indeed, the probe continues, and it continues here on Sunday edition. Now, a joint parliamentary committee has been investigating this, a committee consisting of the Trade and Agriculture Committees of the National Assembly. There are some allegations from some quarters that that is not going to work because there are vested interests from that august house. Musalia Mudavadi has weighed in on the matter, calling for the formation of a judicial commission of inquiry to look into the sugar issues.
As people speak, they keep on thinking that this is a political contest between one camp and the other. So the message and the solution that I'm proposing to the Kenyan people is that save us from the politics. Let us have a public commission of inquiry where facts shall be laid on the table and individuals shall be brought to answer. And that way, we shall know whether somebody is innocent or is complicit in this process.
All right, so even taking a look at social media conversations among Kenyans this past week, not a lot of them seem to have confidence in the joint committee, saying that they will only do a report, then after 5 months, nothing will have been done on this sugar issue. Kipchumba, from where you sit, should we form a public commission of inquiry on this and any other corruption issues?
Looking at the depth of the matter at hand, I think a judicial commission will suffice. But again, we need to ask ourselves, what are the problems that we have encountered with the parliament, with going the joint committee way? One of the problems has been that we get reports, they are never made public, you don't know to hear about them after that. And I think also it is a clearing process. And quoting from the park chairman, Opio Wandai, he told us in broad daylight that the same people, the cartels, are even in parliament. How can we trust the same parliament to prosecute themselves? It is not possible. I think the president should move, and as parliament is doing that, we should have an independent judicial commission to just get into the depth of this, to tell us which institutions slept on the job, who allowed sugar to come in, and even in terms of the intelligence we have around, who and where was the sugar repackaged, to the extent that we have contaminated sugar. Because from Matiang'i's own talk in the committee, we cannot say we have sugar that has mercury. We have contaminated sugar. So how did we end up there? And then again, we need now to widen the bracket. Do we even have contaminated commodities, the contraband, the counterfeits, and how are we going to get out of this? The parliamentary committee the joint parliamentary committee will only answer to the extent of the sugar. And then again, this being Kenya and corruption being what it is, I have fears that the parliamentary committee, just like the previous ones, might not achieve a lot. Look at it this way. After the Solai incident, we had parliamentarians visit Solai and everything. The other day, I have seen a parliamentary group visiting a pipeline oil somewhere, a pipeline project happening somewhere. What we hear is we just see them visit there, we see splash of photos on social media, but we cannot see results. What Kenyans want is what will touch on their lives. Tell Kenyans that I have 10 solid conclusions that tomorrow this is what we will do. This body and this body should be merged to synergize their energy and efforts in fighting contraband. What do we need? Another example is just very simple. 2 days ago, we were told there is a ship, a whole ship came to Mombasa with fertilizer, and it took a walk. You cannot run a port as if you are running a kitchen somewhere or a toilet where somebody can beep in and walk out. So we need a judicial commission to unravel some of these things. Some of the parliamentarians in that parliament are businessmen. They cannot unravel their own rot. We need somebody who has a clear eye, who has a concise mind to work on it.
All right. Husband, do you think the Joint Committee of Parliament is working?
Well, I think, parliamentarians are paid enough money, and they have the responsibility first of representing their constituents and oversighting. And if that is not enough, they can make laws. So I do not understand where the Commission of Inquiry is coming from. And growing up, I've associated commissions with mediocrity. Now, there are 5 key things that if the Parliamentary Select Committee can address, I think we'll mop up all these things. One, there is a lack of a clear sugar policy that is fair to all the players. They need to work towards that. We don't need a commission for that. Number 2, the current sugar policy regime scrapped zoning. And you have a situation where, Rice milling company in their constituency can get sugar from anywhere in the world. It can get sugar from Kisii, from Kakamega, which again is unfair to the farmers who were the main reason why he set up that factory in their constituency. So if you have a very clear-cut policy framework, you can address that, so that if farmers are not paid, you address that. You don't allow millers to go anywhere and take advantage of other farmers if they owe farmers locally. Then number 3, there is lack of anti-poaching policies. So you have Sony, which has a nuclear area, and you have other people come and infiltrate and pay farmers for sugarcane that Sony had invested in, sugarcane that probably Mumias had invested in, or Nzoia had invested in. So if we can address that, we will be solving a lot of problems, because these problems actually affect the sugar farmers. Then number 3, and this is the biggest, allowing traders as opposed to millers to import sugar. If there is a deficit of 200,000 metric tons, why allow traders? It is the reason why they carry sugar in tippers and it is contaminated. And then lastly, Ben, is the government-owned millers are so bureaucratic that if there is any change in the market, the process of adapting and responding to the changes in the market is fairly long, and therefore the private millers and unscrupulous traders take advantage. If that can be sorted, I think we won't need commissions of inquiry.
All right. So let me ask Mark this. He has very good recommendations, but do you think the Joint Committee can sort those problems?
To be honest with you, the vested interests in the sugar industry in Parliament will definitely make it very hard for this commission to deliver. If you look at the quality of questions they were asking and the direction they were asking, you would have been mistaken to think that this was a group of laymen trying to find out the basics about sugar. The research was lacking. Look at Owila, who has sat down with a pen in 2 minutes and has come up with very excellent recommendations. If you listened to those parliamentarians, they had nothing of importance to ask. And to be honest with you, that shows you the amount of shoddiness that will come out of this. Their combined IQ in terms of asking those questions was less than Donald Trump's. That's the reality. So therefore, it must be assumed correctly so that this parliamentary committee will not deliver primarily because A, they do not want to put the intelligence and time and research that is required, and B, there's vested interest. And I've said again, the people they need to be questioning are the people who brought sugar, okay, that was substandard and how it landed into this country. That's the first priority. The second priority is to establish the presence of the farmer and the presence of local processing plants, both privately owned and public owned. They need to talk about that. That's what we need. We need solutions. But this parliamentary committee will not be able to do that because what they're after is to cover up their own. That is the reality. But on page 4 of the Standard, we are a country of fakes. So we've got 340 million fake worth of agriculture and livestock, beauty 484,000, liquor 270 million. You know, the counterfeit industry in this country behooves that committee needs to look at this issue more broadly. The specificity of it for me tells me that there are people who are being protected. There are certain sacred cows that want to be covered up, and that's what needs to change. What needs to happen here is we cannot have fake drugs in this country. If I told you the rot in the drug industry, it's crazy. There are people in this country who I will not name, unless Dismas is willing to pay my bill, but there are people in this country who go to Europe and get donation drugs that are 6 months to expire. They're brought to this country, they repackage them and sell them in our shelves, meaning that those drugs are up to 50% less potent than possible, to the extent today that the cases of drug-resistant diseases has increased. Why? Because someone is living in Runda while people are dying in our villages because of counterfeit products. Now, my problem with this parliament is they're busy talking about one specific issue around sugar while not even solving that issue correctly, and then leaving a whole host of issues undealt with. What the government needs, what these institutions need, is they need to be calling KEBS. They need to be sitting down with KEBS and telling us how come it's not being done correctly. There's an anti-counterfeit agency which has suddenly decided it can work 3 months ago after being threatened to be fired. The rest of the time they were sitting in their offices having steak and single malt whiskey, like Dismas likes to say. So we need to get to the crux of the matter. We are playing games, and all we are trying to do is sanitize our friends who bring sugar from Mogadishu.
Wow. All right. Dismas, commission, judicial commission or parliamentary committee?
I would go for a judicial commission, but maybe let me just reassure Mark that he should name names, and if he needs a top lawyer, then I'll supply with the necessary resources to get a top lawyer.
Excellent.
But I've been watching that joint committee at the National Assembly, and what you see is a catalogue of errors. Errors either of commission and omission. And you see a committee driven by character assassination. You know, there's a big difference between politics and business. So when you have a member of parliament using that august ground to claim that, in fact, the president's brother is guilty of a mistake, and yet he cannot substantiate, that's unacceptable. You've got people who normally go to those committees referred as to friends of the committee, but in fact, they're not friends of the committees. They are friends of cartels, and they're friends of barons going to that committee because they ask specific pointed questions. The Honorable Simba Arati, during that committee meeting, when he was asking Matiang'i questions, his first question was, Dr. Matiang'i, do you have any personal interest in the sugar sector? Before Matiang'i could say anything, the next question is, are you fighting the DP? Now, how can that address the sugar crisis in Kenya? That's one who would address the sugar crisis in Kenya. Then you've got a member of parliament from Aldai. Instead of looking at the sugar issue, is saying, the most powerful man in Kenya. For a moment, I thought he was going to name President Kenyatta. Then he says, Mo Kenyatta is part of this deal. But when you look at the facts, they are very far from the case. So if you expect that joint committee to be a success, you'll be wasting time. Those are the guys that are going to be a successful failure. The only thing they're going to succeed in is character assassination, and they've already done that with a lot of success, dragging in the president's brother's name. But now the beauty of dragging the president's brother's name is President Kenyatta has pronounced himself and said that if my brother is guilty, take him to jail. Have him arrested, prosecuted, and if found guilty, is jailed. Now, in my view, the commission would be the magic bullet we need, because it's not just about whether somebody brought in dirty sugar. No, it's about the entire sugar sector. For instance, you have one minister saying this sugar is contaminated. Another one says it's not contaminated. Another one says I was merely giving a cautionary statement. Now, how is the committee going to arrive at a decision if they do not consult subject matter experts? I've not seen them inviting an economist, an agronomist, a procurement specialist to ask these questions. They've not even invited me as a sugarcane farmer to go and give my opinion, because I'm affected by these things. So if you're expecting that committee to be a success, you're wasting time. And in my view, in future, we need to be very careful with the people we elect to the National Assembly, because some members of parliament have indicated in black and white, actually Opio and I said, that some of the cartel members are seated right here with me. So how do you expect cartel members to find themselves guilty and recommend themselves for prosecution? I think at this stage we need to give Musalia Mudavadi a pat on the back, given the fact that he served in the Ministry of Agriculture and the Treasury, so he knows a few things.
So then this brings me to the next level of the discussion, and Kipchumba, as you make your point very quickly, Hezbollah did mention that he associates commissions of inquiry with mediocrity. That is the view of a lot of Kenyans. A lot of Kenyans think that commissions of inquiry are not serious. In fact, they are the butt of many jokes. When something happens, say, Kenyans like making this joke that, the president is just a former judicial commission, and then they'll eat their allowances, and after that, nothing will come out of this. Kipchumba, let me start with you. How do those judicial commissions become very effective?
Just a question to you, Ben. If today you send me to buy bread, is it my business that you will consume or you will not consume the bread? It is up to you. If you set a commission of inquiry to do the work and bring a report, it is not their business to see that you will implement it. How many reports do we have? Do you want today the Ndungu report?
Are they good reports from what you understand?
Do we want Ndungu to come from wherever he is to come and force us to implement the Ndungu report? No. Do we want today the good man in the TGRC report to come and ask us to implement? No. The thing is, we have issues with goodwill in this country. Our spirit is not there. The wording might be there, but we have no spirit.
So we'll still go back to the same parliament,
yes, even as
to adopt the reports
today about implementing or about the judicial forming a judicial committee to investigate the sugar issue. Ask yourself certain questions. One, there are basic minimums we must just deal with before we go there. The first thing is this. Recently, we had an interview between the owner of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and parliamentarians in the US. You saw the kind of questioning that happened there. But that one ought to be forgiven because of the issue of age. There was an age difference. You got parliamentarians who are 78 years old asking Zuckerberg a question about data and everything. But they tried. Look at our parliamentarians. The depth and the intellectual depth in terms of questioning is bare shallow. For a simple reason, maybe they are compromised. Secondly, maybe they are looking for specific answers. And the other issue is this. We cannot find the right solutions in that committee for a simple reason. Nobody, and I'm saying nobody, invited Kipchumba as a sugar consumer to go and say, if for the last 6 months I have tested mercury in sugar. No. The other thing is this. Our how we form our parliamentary committees, we do not put in place expertise, but regions. We say Ben Kitili comes from Mukambani, sit there. Or Willa from
So you made a very good point. You've made a very good point. But if you go the way of judicial commissions, still going to go back to the same parliament to adopt the reports.
But the question is, must we hide ourselves in a smoke screen because we don't want to be seen?
Good point. Hezbollah, what do you think?
Well, I stick to my point. I mean, we can sanitize this without incurring other expenses and subjecting ourselves to another commission that will also be politicized. This thing is just squarely within the framework of the current setup that we have, and the onus is on President Uhuru Kenyatta. You listen to the last budget, there was nothing on the current situation in the sugar industry. Yet something critical that was scrapped was the sugar development levy that is meant to help farmers. And, you know, the reason why you have these kinds of policies is because the attendant profit is supposed to be geared towards the traders and not the millers, because it is the millers who work with the farmers. But having said that, I think it's incumbent upon Kenyans to understand the broad framework that the Constitution gives us, that if MPs are not going to invest in interrogating some of these things that they are supposed to oversight, the Constitution provides for Kenyans to recall these MPs. And I think from my media background, I want to celebrate the space that the media occupies. And some of these things that we are saying here, it is because we are seeing what is happening and we are helping the public understand. And the media is at the cutting edge of doing that. That this committee and these mediocre questions that they are asking, the media can actually expose them for lack of investing in what they are paid to do. And if they are not doing that, I mean, the media can go ahead and sensitize the public on the processes of recalling an MP. If your MP is focused on the DP, then you have no business having that MP in parliament if you're from the Sugar Belt region. You recall him.
All right. Mark, when was the last time that a judicial commission had impact or had solutions for whatever reason it was formed?
Is that a trick question?
No, it's not.
Because
you can throw bread.
This is Kenya. That has never happened. The reality of the matter is this.
Yes.
If you look at our country, in our constitution, we forgot to mention one major reason for recall, gross stupidity, which is what is exemplified. Not incompetence, stupidity. You know, the inability to mature a thought in your head is a big issue in parliament. And the reason why our parliamentarians are that foolish, and I'm not ashamed to say, is because they go to those committees, number one, based on their tribe. I do not know why coming from Cumberland gives you an expertise on any particular matter, you know, instead of versus going to school or coming from Lualand or whatever. So regional balance in committees is a waste of time. Which problems need to be balanced regionally so that the committees can oversight? It does not make sense. But as a result of that, many of these MPs, listen, every time there's an inquiry on anything, banking, agriculture, whatever, have you ever noticed they only invite the rich people? Have you only ever noticed they invite the people with money? Why? Because those MPs are sitting there the same way traffic police officers sit on the road. They are waiting to have some unga to go cook at home. The reality is they're expecting brown envelopes. This is why Hezbon will never be invited, because his salary from the university cannot interest a politician. This is why I'll never be invited, because these consultancy gigs don't pay enough. So the reality of the matter is this: if you see anyone who sits in front of parliament, it's never the farmer who's the one most affected. There's not a single farmer who's testified. Why? Because they're after the money. In fact, the reason they brought in Muhoho's name was not only to politicize the matter, but they saw Brookside money. That is the reality. These politicians are tumbocrats. You understand? The entire IQ.
So what you're saying is that either way,
digestive tract.
what you're saying is that either way, a judicial commission will be better.
What I'm saying is, you don't need either of that. You know, the funniest thing about this sugar industry debacle, if you read the newspaper correctly, all 120 plus companies, you can tell what they bought, where they got it from, and how it was processed. It does not need 3 people to do it. You understand? What we need, we have agencies that are paid. There's the anti-counterfeit agency, they're paid for it. There's KEBS, there's the Ministry of Interior, there's the Ministry of Trade. What are they doing? Why do we need all these issues?
This must have the final thoughts. 1 minute only.
Oh, that's been unfair when you're discussing sugar. But when you're looking at this entire sugar matter, there's so many things. Number one, it's almost impossible to tell the truth from propaganda. And if Mark, I wouldn't commit a fallacy of generalization by suggesting that all MPs are foolish. No. You've got a number of bright MPs seated in that committee, but maybe the power of cartels would be overwhelming. Now, when you're talking about these agencies which are supposed to be fighting, say, corruption, or maybe we should have come up with policies in the sugar sector. It's only a judicial commission of inquiry which will determine how did we come up with this policy of saying we are going to allow people to import sugar without an upper limit. It's only that commission which will be able to summon the CS for Treasury, for agriculture, for industrialization, have them sit down and agree on issues. That's number one. Number two, the committee sometimes vote on issues. Can you imagine those members of the National Assembly voting on scientific issues? That you think there was mercury in that sugar? How many of you are going to raise your hands and say there was no mercury? So they're going to vote. You can't allow them to vote on scientific issues. Let's have that commission which will invite subject matter experts. They even get that sugar, they do the testing, they interrogate A from Z, and the mandate should be so wide so as to go back to 1963 and establish where did the rain start beating us.
All right.
Because right now what is happening, as Mark has indicated, and he seems to have a lot of information about the sugar sector, despite the promises of getting him a good lawyer, is not revealing. Because if he doesn't reveal this information, all of us are going to die. And then lastly, it's unacceptable for the government to tell us that there's a lot of counterfeits in Kenya, but they're not telling us what to do. Now, if you're telling me there are counterfeit drugs in our pharmacies, as a Kenyan, what am I supposed to do? If you tell me there's mercury in sugar, what am I supposed to do? If these agencies are not working, what am I supposed to do as a Kenyan? Go back to Mosocho and say, I'm not taking tea anymore, I'm not taking sugar anymore. What am I supposed to do? Where do we have a government in place which is not giving us directions? And why is President Kenyatta allowing 4 cabinet ministers to give contradicting information? One says, you can import as much sugar as you want, there's no upper limit. Another one says, I'm giving you a
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much. Very, very detailed recommendations and thoughts on what should be happening. We'll wait and see what will be happening. That joint committee of the National Assembly continues to probe the matter. We will wait and see if Musalia Mudavadi's recommendations are taken up. Let's take a quick commercial break. Here on Sunday edition, we are back shortly to talk about some politics. Stay with us.
To challenge the leader of majority at Senate, Mheshimiwa Kipchumba Murkomen, to challenge the leader of majority at Parliament, Mheshimiwa Aden Duale. If they have lost confidence in the government of President Kenyatta, they must resign immediately. Lifestyle audit that has been ordered by the President is a lifestyle audit of the living, including those in high leadership positions. So if they are feeling the heat, let them bolt out. Some of us are ready. I am ready, as William Kamket, to be the leader of majority of the National Assembly. I am ready.